Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back to the On the Rise podcast. Thank you for listening. We've got another amazing guest with me today. Very excited, listeners, to have Allan Langer here today. Allan, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, it's been great. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to chopping it up with you. So Allan is a nationally recognized keynote speaker, sales performance coach, and best-selling author of The 7 Secrets to Selling More by Selling Less. With over 25 years of experience in sales, leadership, and communication, Allan helps companies transform how their people connect, not just with customers, but with each other. Allan, I can't think of a better person to have on this podcast than yourself, with the background, that you're in. And I'm looking forward to really kind of chopping that up. But before we get started, before we hit the record button, Allan mentioned that he lives about 15 miles outside of Providence, Rhode Island. And I told Allan the last time that I was there, I visited a food truck. And Allan, tell us more about that food truck.
Well, it's the Haven Brothers food truck. It's been there since it's over 100 years now. I think it was a horse and buggy when it first started, or something like that. And they make. I'm telling you, I've been all over the world. They still make the best hamburger you'll ever have. It's just phenomenally good. But what's interesting about Haven Brothers is Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, came from Providence. And if you watch or are a fan of Family Guy, you will notice the Haven Brothers food truck in quite a few episodes. So he was famous for putting a lot of things from Rhode Island into that show.
That's great. Well, outside of Seth MacFarlane and Haven Brothers and the best burgers on the planet, would love to maybe learn a little bit more, about your, background, your journey, really predominantly what you're focused on today as well.
Well, in sales, been in sales. I'm coming on 30 years now, which is hard to believe, but it's funny. I started my first professional job. I actually worked in college athletics. I did marketing and fundraising, and I did that for about 15 years. I got burnt out, didn't know what I wanted to do, and a good friend of mine said, who was in sales at the time, he said, "Why don't you get into sales?" And I said, which would most people say, "Sales? Who the hell wants to be a salesperson?" Long story short, I got into it. I started selling sunrooms, was my first job. And from there, I went to Home Depot selling roofing, siding, windows, and then ended up with Andersen Windows for the bulk of my career. And I was the number one sales rep there for many, many years. And what I realized is why it took some time to think to realize this, but, I kind of thought about, why am I better than some of the, most of my colleagues? And I realized it was because I wasn't really following the process that most of these companies teach. You have to have a sales process. Obviously, that you came from ADP. However, what I thought separated myself was I was myself in the house. I wasn't the process. And so many reps become salespeople and follow the process and are robotic and it sounds like a script. So that's what I did. And it wasn't rocket science, but I wrote a book about it, and the book's behind me, and it became a bestseller. And that's what I didn't expect. I'm a writer. I love to write. So once it became a bestseller, then I started getting requests for speaking engagements, and I was turning those into training. And now I have my own company called the 7 Secret Sales Academy.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And thanks for that background. It's so interesting that you kind of fell into sales. My journey is completely opposite. I kind of knew that I wanted to be a sales guy, by the time I was 4 or 5 years old.
Really? Wow.
Selling Christmas wreaths door to door, selling, Snicker bars, giving, selling Bazooka Joe bubble gum for 25 cents a piece, or I'll give you a 5 for $1 kind of a thing, give you a good deal. But that was kind of my journey, kind of started off very early. And it's interesting that you talked about, kind of your non-traditional, sales techniques and strategies, because I remember when I got into my professional technology sales career, very early on, I had some very quick success. But the one thing is my sales leaders never wanted me to share with people my process, because my process was very different than what they were teaching, at our corporate headquarters as far as the sales playbook. So I really want to dial down into that, Alan, that specifically, and kind of along that same lines. I know that you kind of built your career on this idea of selling more by selling less. And so maybe we can kind of fold that into the response.
Well, I have a story about that, but that concept, I call it the anti-salesperson, because every person, I ask this one question almost to every audience I'm in front of, uh, obviously depending on the topic, but I'll ask the question: show of hands, let's say there's 500 people in the audience, who here likes meeting with a salesperson? And about six people raise their hands, and usually it's the sales managers in the office in the audience, right? Nobody wants to meet with a salesperson ever. And I started to think, why is that? And it's because they're expecting a terrible experience. They're expecting the sales guy to rip them off or to pull one over on them. And when you become the anti-salesperson, the person that they're not expecting, the breath of fresh air, the car mechanic who actually doesn't rip you off, like when you get that experience, you just tell it, you're like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this. And but when you're the experience they are expecting, the typical sales guy, the ABC, I got to follow this. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to sell you. I've got commission breath. You're just what they were expecting, and you will be a very mediocre salesperson doing that. So that's what I tried to focus on, and I tried to focus on. Well, let me look at the psychology of why that is. What are the things? How does the brain work to make this conversation more comfortable for the person on the other side, because they're not expecting a great conversation. So how do I make it one? And that's what's in that book. Body language, social proof, all these different psychological things that are really the pillars of influence that makes the brain work.
Yeah, that makes total sense. One of the things I remember early on, when it came to that traditional sales playbook that we were always told, and maybe this is still being told in corporate, level sales organizations today, is when it comes to building rapport, you got to avoid talking about the weather, politics, those types of things. But what was most amazing is that when I would build rapport with people, we would talk about the weather. We would talk about tough topics like, religion. We would talk about politics and things like that. Now, keep in mind, most of my audience were small business owners, and they tend to lean the direction that I lean. So I had that kind of immediate bond with them. But what I actually found is what they told us not to talk about, I was talking about and having success with it.
Yeah, it really depends. Like I always train, small talk is effective at the beginning, but get off of it right away. Don't spend I've been on, so many ride-alongs with reps, and they spend 15 minutes talking about the weather or politics or whatever. Yeah, you got to get away from that. I want to get right into it. You called me here to solve a problem, so I'll sometimes only say, "Hey, I'm Alan from Anderson. How can I help you today?" Not "How you doing?" "Oh, wow, it's a lot of traffic out there. Oh my God, the rain's coming." All that stuff that people, that they want to cushion the conversation. Just get into it. "Hey, I'm here to help you. What can I do? Take me to your problem." And people love that because they're not they if they have three or four companies out there, they're all doing the same thing. You can't do the same thing because there's no way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, I totally agree with you. I think that really kind of comes across as being, very genuine, authentic. You're here to help, you're here to serve. Like you said, take me right to the problem, tell me where the pain is, and I'm going to tell you right now if I can help you or if I can't.
Exactly right. I'm gonna that's the one thing is like you're there to help the person, and the big sentence I use is whether they buy or not. If you leave there and they didn't buy your product for whatever reason, but they still felt that you were a good person and you are going to help them in some way, that's where your career takes off, because you'll still get referred. Some of the best referrals I ever got were from customers who didn't buy from me. Those were like, I'd get one of those. I'm like, man, I know I did a good job there.
Yeah, that's right. Because you built that connection with them. They know, they like, they trust you, those types of things. And yeah, you're exactly right. Those can lead to certainly profitable relationships, even though it might not be with that person, that's directly in front of you. And maybe you already answered this question, Alan, but what would you say is kind of the biggest misconception that salespeople have, about what actually influences a buyer's decision?
Wow. The the one thing I think so many salespeople there's a couple things because a lot of things just popped in my head with that question. There's a couple things salespeople tend to focus on too much. One is how do I handle objections? They get so focused on, oh my God, I'm gonna get objections. How do I handle them? And the way I respond to that is, how you handle objections, you don't get them in the first place. And if you have a genuine conversation with someone, the chances of you getting an objection goes down astronomically. And reps always say, I got an objection from the customer. No, you didn't. The objection came from you. You were the one who gave the prospect the objection. You did something that made them feel like they're not comfortable. See, sales comes down to comfort. You never buy anything when you're nervous, right? You're never sitting there saying, oh, I'm really nervous to buy this laptop, and then you buy it anyway. No, you don't do it because you're nervous. It's called buying anxiety. So when someone has that anxiety, if you don't figure out a way to alleviate that by having a good conversation, building that trust, they're not going to buy. That anxiety creates objections. The number one objection, everything was great, Jeremy. Hey, you know what? We're going to think about it. Can you email me that? I mean, every rep every day gets the same. We're going to think about it. Can we think about it? I need to think about it. That's not the objection. The objection is somewhere under that. And that's what you got to find to continue the conversation to get it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. In my tech sales days, I sold over 16,000 small business owners, on our services. And I would oftentimes be asked, Jeremy, can you walk us through your closing techniques? Okay. And I said, sure, but there isn't one, right? And that's a direct byproduct, in my opinion, of my ability to build immediate rapport with the individual, uncover the pain, like you talked about, deliver a solution for that pain. So the next natural step in the process is well, how do we get started,
Yeah,
right?
let's go.
So
Right.
people would always ask me, Jeremy, can I tell you my top 3 objections and how you would overcome them? It's like, yeah, no problem, but I'm not getting the same objections. So I might not be the expert at overcoming those objections. Does that make sense?
100%. And the other, when you asked me that question previously, the objections was the first thing that popped in my head, and closing was the second. That's the second biggest question I get from sales reps. What's your closing technique? I need a closing technique. And I keep telling people, closing is not a destination. When a sales rep says, I got to the close, I know right away it was a bad sales appointment, because the close is not a compartmentalized piece of the sales process. It's just the extension of your great conversation that you simply had. Like you just said, you found the pain. This is the solution for the pain. Let's get you on the calendar and figure out, to get rid of this pain. Again, I always say what I do, I sometimes like, God, this is not that hard, but nobody does it. Like everybody struggles with, they turn into a salesperson. It's like the radio guy. You're talking, you have a friend, and he's a normal guy, right? But he's a radio announcer. And then you listen to him on the radio, and he's a completely different person. It's like, hey, welcome to WJB. That's not him. Well, that's what salespeople do. You talk to a regular guy, I'm a salesperson, but then he gets in front of the customer and he becomes the salesperson, and he talks differently and he acts differently. Just be yourself. Just have the conversation. So that's what I talk about.
I'm Zach Haptonstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investors. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people feel like they have to, be an actor or an actress. They have to perform, in front of the prospect, right? Well, people can genuinely sense that you're trying to perform for them. So my advice for people, and it sounds like yours as well, is listen, just be yourself, right? People will authentically fall in love with you and not necessarily what you're trying to sell. And so get them to buy into you. And it's really, I talk about this kind of concept of trust, right? We build trust with people one drop at a time, and that can happen over the course of a genuine conversation with somebody. But the most important way, or the biggest thing that I have seen out there in the space today on how to build immediate trust with people is genuineness and authenticity. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I just did a podcast with another gentleman, and the whole concept was about being authentic, and that's what I'm talking about is if you're just yourself, if you lead with helping and not selling, if you walk up to that prospect and you don't have the end result in mind, because that's a lot of reps make the mistake of, I got to make the sale, and they forget about the conversation. If you genuinely want to help them, they will sense that, and the conversation will go from there. But if you go in there with commission breath and you go in there, I have to make this sale, they're going to sense that as well. And you just fall into the bucket of just another typical salesperson. So leading with helping and not selling is really the whole cornerstone of my book and what I teach.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I know from a commission-based sales associate for 25, years, a recovering sales guy now, of course. I know that, those quotas, they don't get smaller, they only get bigger. And, there's that constant sense of urgency, which is, what I believe also separates, the wheat from the chaff as it relates to, top performing sales professionals. Is always kind of that hunger, that pit in that stomach, that sense of urgency. But if you're coming across as desperate in those sales conversations, the prospect can smell that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what you have to avoid. And when you have that mindset of that service mindset, it really just it's a game changer. It's what I realized, when I first started at Anderson, they had their sales process. And I would follow that sales process, and I was closing 28% like everyone else in the room was closing. And I wanted to jump off a bridge. Like almost 8 out of 10 people were telling me no. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So then I started to do the research, and, oh, let me do this. And, oh, wow, I shouldn't be doing this, is wrong in the process. That doesn't make any sense, because it's creating sales resistance. Sales processes, if they're done wrong, create sales resistance. Don't lower it. Your job is to lower that sales resistance when you get there. And the only way to do that is to be genuine and authentic.
That makes total sense. Now let's maybe pivot to this kind of topic or concept of body language. I know that's one of your specialties. What's maybe two or three different cues that signal a prospect is, skeptic or defensive, really cues that you feel like most salespeople just completely miss.
Well, I will say most salespeople, the majority, well over 90%, don't even pay attention to body language, because they're so caught up in their process. They could literally have a customer look at their watch while they're speaking, and they just keep talking. And that's another thing. Salespeople talk way too much. They don't shut up and listen. But here I'll give you one that I always looked for constantly. So when you meet someone first, whether you're meeting them in the house, if you're selling in-home products, or B2B, whatever it is, you're going to meet that person. And for the most part, unless they're a sociopath, they're going to give you what I call a polite smile. A polite smile is a yearbook smile. Someone says, "Hey, say cheese," you go and you smile. That's what people do, because they don't know you yet. So you're going to get a polite smile. They'll shake your hand, whatever it is. A polite smile is a smile that does not have wrinkles, or what they call crow's feet, on your eyes. And the mouth actually goes back instead of up toward the ears. And you'll see it. You'll notice it if you look at yearbook pictures. When that smile turns into a genuine smile, where the crow's feet show up, the eyes squint, and the mouth goes toward the ears, that's when they're comfortable. So I would always look for that polite smile during the appointment to turn into a genuine smile. When it turned into a genuine smile, I knew that they were liking me, and that trust was being built. But if the smile stayed polite and I wasn't getting through to them, then I knew I wasn't on the right track. So that's one thing to look for, is that polite smile. The other thing, this is kind of interesting. It's a little deeper than this, but it's kind of a surface level fun thing to talk about. When people scratch their nose, okay, quite often it depends on the context of the conversation. It means they're fibbing or they're lying. Because when we lie, when we get nervous, the capillaries in our nose expand and our nose gets itchy. The famous Disney movie, 1939, Pinocchio. What happened with Pinocchio when he lied? His nose grew. So they knew that back in 1939 that that's what happened to the capillaries in the nose. So they turned it into this cartoon. But it's a true thing. If someone says, "Yeah, I like that number," and they just do that with their nose, they're not telling you the truth. And you have to, look at that. Now, if they've got a cold or they've been scratching their nose the whole time, then it goes out the window. But if you're having a conversation and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they say something and go like this, could be meaning that they're fibbing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I could definitely see that being one of those body language types that would likely lead to the outcome of them maybe not, being completely truthful with you. Do you have any real life examples of maybe where, correct body language, changed the direction or the outcome of a sale?
Oh, absolutely. I remember this one very vividly. I was a older couple. It was a pretty large window job, about 60 grand back in those days. And they said they wanted to do it. So we're sitting at the table and I looked at them. I said, "Great. Are we doing financing? You guys want to write a check, put on your credit card?" And the wife said, "We're going to do the 10-year 6.9 loan." And I saw the husband glance at her, and then he pursed his lips. Pursed lips is another big thing. Pursed lips is always negative. So someone goes like that, purses their lips. So the husband pursed his lips, didn't say anything, and just sat there. And I saw the pursed lips. I'm like, something's off here. So then I said, "You know what, guys? I'm going to let you chat about this. I have to go outside and call a customer anyway. So you chat for a few minutes. I'll be right back." And I went outside. Didn't call a customer. I just, hung out for a few minutes. When I went back in, the husband met me at the door, put his arm around me, and he goes, "Come on, Al, we're going to do this. We're not going to do the 6.9 loan. We're going to do the 12-month no interest loan." I said, "Okay, great." And what happened was they didn't speak about what they wanted to talk about. They didn't want to talk about finances in front of me, but she picked the wrong financing, and he didn't want to embarrass her. But he's like, "I'm guaranteed this was the conversation. We're not paying 6.9% on a $60,000 loan. Let's pay this off in a year." And the loan and everything went fine. But I guarantee you, if I just kept going and he sat there and didn't say anything and we did the 6.9% loan, that's a canceled sale the next day.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's amazing how something as simple as pursed lips kind of led you to pick up on that, buyer behavior.
Yeah, it saved the sale.
Yeah, save the deal, right? So, I know that you're a best-selling, author of the 7 Secrets to Selling More by Selling Less. Which maybe one or two of the, 7 secrets do people struggle to implement the most, and why do you think that is?
It's I think body language is right up there because I just think people get, so caught up in the process. They're just not paying attention. But we all, as human beings, we absorb and pay attention, or we know body language is happening. It's just a matter of being aware of it and doing something about it. So I would say that would be number one. I think a lot of people forget about social proof as well. Social proof is incredibly powerful. Like, I just did, let's say you're in a small business and you're in a car dealership and like, "Hey, I just, we signed up 10 car dealerships in this state just last month." Social proof, bringing up somebody else like them, has to be like them, that did the same thing. People, human beings, want the comfort of knowing someone else that's similar to them did the same thing. So, but most reps kind of don't think about that. They forget about it, or they'll say, "Most of my customers do this." That doesn't really have an impact, saying most of my customers do this. You know what? I have 3 customers who live in a Center Hall Colonial just like you, and they put in the same exact bay window. That's social proof. But they don't go there. They just say, "Oh, most of my customers do this, and majority of my customers do this." That's not powerful enough. You have to be very specific. So I would say those 2 things are probably the top 2, coming from the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I know, as a recovering sales professional myself, I used to get a lot of questions, and obviously, my first response is always, "Well, that's a great question." Secondly, reaffirming the fact and letting them know that that question is a very common question that I've gotten from a lot of other, folks as well. So just kind of giving them that reassurance that it's not a bad question and really allows them to continue to open up more and ask additional questions. And as they ask those additional questions, that's where we're almost kind of navigating our way through what some of those objections might be, but they're not actually objections, there's genuine questions.
Yes. And here's one thing to put a little bow on that question you asked is what do reps mostly miss? What I see, and this is an epidemic. Now that COVID is gone, I can use that word without it sounding, insensitive. So many salespeople ask closed-ended questions. You have to ask open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions, the brain defaults to negativity. The brain defaults to closed-ended questions. It's easier to ask, do you have any questions? And the answer to that is 99% of the time is, no, I'm good. It's like when you walk into the store. Can I help you find something? What do we say? I'm all set. I'm good. And then you realize, oh, crap, I need to know where the screwdrivers are. But your brain automatically answers yes or no. So reps do that all the time. Instead of saying, do you have any questions? What questions do you have? Open-ended. When you ask an open-ended question, it reveals the emotion behind why you're there. Closed-ended questions don't do that. You know, you know, is this window drafty? Yes. Great. Now where do you go from there? Tell me about the draft on that window and how it's bothering you. Now you're going to reveal the pain. So many reps don't ask open-ended questions, and it drives me nuts when I'm with someone. I want to kick them under the table. Like, you're asking too many closed-ended questions. You're not getting to the emotion. Emotion is what sells. Products, benefits, features, they don't sell. The emotion of solving the pain does. So asking open-ended questions is a huge problem in sales.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'd like to also run one other quick scenario past you before we kind of wrap up here. And that is, from a sales psychology perspective, I always found a lot more value in getting a no from somebody rather than getting the ghost, right? I felt like if I could get the no, then at least there was an opportunity for me to go back again. If I got the ghost, I really had no, other course of direction. And it felt like, to me anyways, that just by getting the no from them, I would chalk up, 4, 5, 6, 7 no's. And then all of a sudden, after I was persistent and I continued to nurture that relationship, over time, eventually that no converted into a yes. But if I was ghosted, the likelihood of a sale was little to nothing.
Right. And sales reps get ghosted because they didn't really make the connection. They missed something. And their follow-up is usually pretty terrible. Just checking in. Hey, just checking in to see if you're thinking about, and they're very soft and very, like, I don't want to upset the customer. My whole point, well, my strategy in that is after, 3 or 4 follow-up emails, if you're not hearing back, I use a very simple one sentence line. Hey, Jeremy, have you given up on fixing your paycheck situation? Question mark, Allan. That's it. No, email me back. Have a great, nothing. Have you given up on, and then fill in the blank. And almost 100% of the time you will get a response, whether it's yes or no. That's what I want to know. If it's no, I moved on with someone else. Fine. Now I can get you out of my pipeline. But if it's, you know what? Yeah, I'm still thinking about it. What do we need to do now? So have you given up on, and then fill in the blank of whatever you're selling is a very effective way to get someone to respond to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And those words absolutely matter. And I think you nailed that, Allan. I'd like to kind of wrap up with, a couple last questions here. Before we really wrap up, though, there's one question that's on every salesperson's mind, and that is, how AI and automation and digital funnels, are taking over, so much of that customer journey. So, what does human first selling, look like, in 2026 and beyond?
I think AI is a great opportunity for human first selling to become, you know, the thing that most prospects desire. because they're getting inundated now, especially on LinkedIn and wherever they are, with messages that are written by robots, and they're written, they're all automated, so it's not a person. I got a message on LinkedIn the other day that said "Dear," and then it had 5 question marks. Instead of my name, it had 5 question marks. So I'm like, really? Like, you're not even paying attention to what's going out. Like, you're making yourself like there's no way I would even contact you. So I think the person that's genuine, that's more personable, that's real, people are going to gravitate toward, because they're already, there's AI fatigue out there. Don't forget what the A means in AI. It means artificial, and artificial, people don't want to deal with artificial. They want to deal with real.
Yeah, absolutely. And the adage goes, people buy from people, not companies per se. But I will say that in my new kind of role, I've actually received some solid leads through ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is obviously, the AI learning is actually helping lead to, more customer acquisition because of.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you're right. You're 100% right. I'm not poo-pooing AI. I mean, it's an amazing technology, but you got to use it the right way. Like I use ChatGPT and a couple of other ones every single day. It helps with your writing. I write a post, I'll put it in there. It'll come up with some suggestions. It does find industry people and stuff for you, but when you get down to the actual contacting of the person and having that conversation, that's got to be you. Don't let AI do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this has been a great conversation, Allan. You've provided us with a tremendous amount of value. What might be 1 or 2 different ways that our listening audience can connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
Well, you can just find me on LinkedIn. It's Allan Langer. It's ALLAN, LANGER, or my website is allanger.com. So it's AL and then LANGER.com.
That's great. Well, we'll go ahead and put those links in the show notes for the episode. Again, really appreciate you being on the episode today.
Oh, Jeremy, is great. Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
Of course. And listening audience, thank you again for joining another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.